So that vessel left after the crash. Pinellas County Sheriff's deputies located about 3.5 miles south by the Bel Air Causeway. The operator and the passengers were on board that vessel. So FWC is handling the crash investigation. The United States Coast Guard is handling the administrative investigation involving a U.S. Coast Guard inspected vessel, which the ferry is. So Major Evan Lakowski from FWC is here with us, along with the Clearwater Fire and Rescue EMS Chief Tony Tedesco. I'm going to turn it over to EMS Chief Tedesco first, and he can talk a little bit about what they encountered and his personnel encountered upon arriving at the scene and why they declared it a mass casualty event. Chief Tedesco.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Tedesco, Tony-Tedesco. I am the EMS Chief for the City of Clearwater and Acting Deputy Chief for the City of Clearwater Fire Rescue. Yesterday we did respond to this mass casualty incident, and upon arrival our crews were inundated with a great deal of victims and patients, all coming aboard basically the mouth of the Memorial Causeway Bridge. A great many patients. Now, what is a mass casualty? A mass casualty is when we have more victims than we do resources to be able to handle the victims that are on scene, and that's what we had. We actually entered into a level 1 mass casualty. We pulled as many ambulances and transport rescues as we possibly can. We ended up with, as Chief Gandy said, 10 patients when it was all said and done. We had a multitude of other patients as well that were thankfully uninjured. We did have one deceased that was aboard the Coast Guard boat. And so our top priority in situations like that are obviously we needed to find very quickly the most injured, of which, like we said, we took many who we call trauma alerts. They were sent to trauma facilities via 2 helicopters, an ambulance, and also a critical care transport unit. And again, when we're looking at that kind of an incident, we're looking for our most critical. And it was a little bit challenging because we had great Good Samaritans who were bringing people in. So you could imagine being on scene with only a few personnel and being inundated with probably 30, 40 people at a time coming towards you at all ends of that basin on all different boats as people were being, taken by Good Samaritan boats, and us having to have to sift through that. Definitely a challenge. We overcame, and we did what we needed to do. And so there you have it.
So next up, Major Laskowski from FWC, and he can speak to the crash investigation and give you kind of some perspective on how they go about conducting these investigations. Certainly it's early on in this, a lot of witnesses, a lot of information to sift through. Clearwater PD is providing a support role, obtaining evidence, obtaining videos, identifying witnesses and potential witnesses. So we've worked well and collaborated together on many things over the years since we implemented a Marine unit, but I think it's important for you to hear from them on everything that they have to do to conduct one of these investigations. It's much different than a garden variety crash on a surface street. Major.
Thank you, Chief. Major Evan Laskowski with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and that's EVANLASKOWSKI. So last night we responded to the accident involving approximately a 37-foot recreational center console vessel ramping up the stern of an approximately 40-foot commercially registered vessel with approximately 45 people on board. It was a very dynamic accident scene involving several different locations. The recreational vessel ended up at the Bel Air boat ramp, as the chief stated. The commercial ferry ended up on a sandbar, and then we had several different victims transported to 4 different local hospitals. So we had all hands on deck. We responded with 3 critical incident investigators, their critical incident supervisor, along with several patrol officers, Clearwater PD officers, detectives, and then our area supervisor, who stands behind me, Captain Matt Delarosa, also responded to scene. We seized both vessels as evidence as part of this investigation, and we're continuing to conduct interviews and review relevant footage of the incident to aid in our investigation. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of this tragic accident, and we're committed to completing a thorough accident investigation to determine exactly what caused this horrific event. And we can open it up, or I'll turn it back over to the chief, and he can.
Sure. And I'll finish what you were saying. We'll open it up to questions. We will field them based on who did what. So if it's related to the crash investigation, certainly FWC. If it's medical evacs and things like that, Clearwater Fire and PD can answer those questions. So go ahead.
Question for FWC, I believe. Can you confirm that the suspect vessel or boat was a blue and white boat with the word statement written across it?
Yeah, so we can confirm that vessel was there. And some members of the media were actually at the Bel Air boat ramp last night and were taking some photographs, and that was the vessel in question for this accident. Yes, ma'am.
My question is for Major Laskowski. Can you, because we can see in the video the conditions last night, could you please comment on what you observed from these conditions? What kind of a boating night was it? It looks like the ferry's running lights are on, and it was a moonlit night, and there's lighting from the bridge. So can you talk to me about what conditions existed down on the water last night?
So we will be surveying both vessels, checking for operation of the running lights. U.S. Coast Guard is also conducting a concurrent investigation into the commercial vessel and making sure that all federal regulations were followed on that vessel. So they'll be also investigating all the equipment on that commercial vessel to make sure everything was in working progress. Our team of investigators will be completing damage assessments to both vehicles, inspecting all the different vessel systems, and then we'll also revisit the accident site and determine exactly, the points of view of the two operators and what they may have seen just prior to, during, and after that accident occurred.
But you can see in the video, the ferry's lights are on, and it's a moonlit, well-lit night, can't you?
It would depend on which direction you're traveling. Sometimes if you're an experienced boater and the moon is behind you, you've got great visibility. If the moon's in front of you, not so much. So it's a preliminary. We'll be, identifying all of that through our investigation.
What's the status of the recreational boat driver? Has he been cooperative? What's his status right now? What's his identity?
Do you have his identity?
Yes. Yeah. So I believe we're going to release all those names, and we'll get that out via our PIO. So I'll give you all those names in one from our PIO. But he was cooperative last night. We conducted, like we normally do, our survey of the vessel, everybody that had been on scene. We spoke with the witnesses that we were capable of speaking with. The chief spoke to just the sheer volume. And I'll go back a little bit. And the initial response by everyone is to make sure that we protect everyone's life and limb, regardless of what vessel they were part of or what their involvement may or may not have been. And that was our initial response, with well over 50 people involved, a lot of unknowns. That's where we started initially. Once we were able to file back from that, we were able to try and piece and part which persons belonged with which vessels, and began our survey of those accidents. And the chief mentioned it as well. Vessel accident investigation is very different than vehicle accident investigation. You're dealing with a dynamic environment. Tides and winds shift everything around. Things don't tend to sit in exactly the same place, and it just takes a long process to work all the way through that. As well as, unlike metal, fiberglass and other things tends to kind of bend and have some resiliency. So it takes a larger survey. We use a lot of LiDAR equipment and a bunch of laser-guided stuff to really map damage and put things back together. And that's sometimes what will delay these investigations a little bit. It seems like it should be pretty easy to put one thing together with something else, but it's really not as simple as laying things over each other. You really got to figure out what was pre-existing. If anyone's owned a boat, unfortunately they bump against docks and things like that. It happens. So every scratch may be valid or it may not based on the accident that occurred, and how do you corroborate those things with it. And further than that, just again, in the discussion of boating accidents, you have a number of factors with this accident specifically. The blue and white vessel is a larger vessel. Fiberglass, again, in size and weight is much larger than the vessel that it ends up striking. The vessel it does end up striking has a much lower freeboard. It sits lower to the water, and those dynamics can kind of cause some of those ramping effects. There's a lot of buoyancy that's in play, and that can also cause things to both land and separate at the same time. So you get a lot of factors in there, and that can lead to injury and everything else in between. So if that answers your question, again, we'll put out all those names specifically, but that's sort of the investigation in a whole.
You said the boat captain was cooperative, but my understanding is at the scene that several witnesses told me that he declined the field sobriety test or a breathalyzer. Is that accurate?
So that is not accurate. So the captain voluntarily submitted to a breathalyzer, and there was no alcohol determined in that breathalyzer sample. It read 000 based on the certified breath test that was given to the intoxilizer.
Is anyone in custody?
No one's currently in custody at this time.
Can you confirm someone on that recreational boat called 911 and did remain at the scene for some time?
So we're still working through the volume of 911 calls that came through, which boats they were in. The call takers here at Clearwater did a fantastic job, but we're obviously under a large amount of duress with the number of people, the volume of noise that was going on in the background. So I can't state exactly which vessels made which phone calls.
So would it be considered a hit and run then, or would it, if you stayed for, is it considered a hit and run, or what is it considered? What do you guys think?
So we're currently working with the state attorney's office to make sure that we fit whatever legal definitions for hit and run should or shouldn't be based on the circumstances that persisted that evening.
There was another scene at Seminole Boat Ramp where another individual was detained. Was that related, and if so, how?
I'm not aware of anyone being detained at Seminole Boat Ramp. I know Seminole Boat Ramp was the staging point for all the EMS units, and the large majority of the patients were brought there, triage, and the chief can speak to that as how they triaged them. But I don't know of anyone being detained at that boat ramp, at least from our standpoint. And if Clearwater detained anyone there, they could speak to that.
County Sheriff's Office did, and I believe I saw one of your folks on scene.
Yeah, so the only investigative efforts we took in terms of that was at the Bel Air Boat Ramp, as we discussed. So we assisted the PD and the fire department at Seminole with the victims that were there.
Sorry, have you seen, I know Chief Gandy said that the boat overrode the ferry about 3/4 of the way. Have you seen something like this happen before? Can you talk about the severity of this?
Unfortunately, these accidents happen all over the state. This isn't the first. I hope it's the last. I don't know that it will be, but unfortunately, they do occur. I saw the damage to both vessels extensively last night, and that video depicts it very accurately. There was definitely a point where both those boats were fully entangled, and a large amount of damage resulted to the ferry boat as a result of that entanglement.
Are you able to say the ages of the victims? Was there any children involved in those injuries, adults? Can you talk about that a little bit more?
So all the victims that we had identified were all adults. I believe there were some children on the vessel itself. Like I said, we'll release that full list. That we don't need to read out all those names, but we'll release that full list to you guys today via RPIO.
Did any of the victims fall in the water, and how deep is that water?
I'm not sure if anyone went overboard. Again, it's a dynamic case with how many people were on the vessel itself. Everyone other than the one decedent was able to survive the incident itself. I know some people also got themselves off the boat. Once the crash occurred, the vessel ended up in some shallower water right there on the sandbar, which I think is where that story was coming from for that vessel being aground. It did end up aground post the event, and a lot of people were able to get themselves off the boat in pretty shallow water and walk to either other Good Sams that were able to take them away or responding vessels that were able to get them back to shore safely.
One witness told me that they saw a blue and white vessel pushing the ferry towards the sandbar. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that. Again, the chief talked about the longer version of this video. There is many more minutes that we're going to diagnose in there to try and figure out what was going on. And back to the question about 911 calls, we're going to try and build that timeline back and see who was making what phone calls at what time. And again, that's the complexity of an event of this magnitude, as well as when it involves boats like this. Again, every piece of evidence tries to float away. We were dealing with a late night, and again, a lot of people to deal with.
But bottom line, if you hit a boat and you call 911, you should remain until law enforcement. Should you ever leave before law enforcement arrives? Or?
We would always recommend that if someone's involved in an accident, you remain on scene, you render aid that you can, you call all the local authorities that you can, and do everything you can in that moment. And we're committed. If a hit and run occurred here and people were injured, people were heavily influenced by this event, we're committed to working those charges all the way through. Again, we've already engaged in discussions. We have a strong working relationship with the Pinellas County State Attorney's Office, and we're working through whatever those charges may be. And to the fullest extent of the law, we will prosecute any crime that is discovered.
Any estimate on how fast the recreational boat was moving at the time of the crash?
So difficult to make speed estimates. Cameras are a challenge there as well. So we'll work through that once we do our crash investigation. We actually can use kind of the way the fiberglass breaks and the way that things kind of come together, similar to what's done on the road. And we'll get a speed. It's just hard to make that estimate now. You can see from that video and make your own estimate, but we'll get a good number once our investigation's complete.
Do you know how fast that wake zone area is? Is that a wake zone area?
So where they were in currently would have been no restriction on speed other than safe operation, but there's no slow speed or minimum wake applied to that area. They were quickly approaching one, but where they were was not slow speed or minimum wake.
Can you at least release the name of the operator of the blue and white vessel that we saw in Bel Air last night?
Yes, we'll release all of that. Like I said, I'd rather just let all that go out as one big piece from RPIO.
Just to clarify, is it correct to say that the boat did not stay at the crash scene, but it's not determined yet whether it's being investigated as an actual hit and run?
It is safe to say that, yeah. There's evidence that shows that the vessel did remain there for a period of time and then ultimately ended up at the Bel Air boat ramp separate from the accident location. That is an accurate description of what occurred.
Question for Chief Tedesco. I think when you talk about mass casualty events and how you guys handle them, can you just speak to a little bit what the FWC was talking about, but can you just speak to the difficulty in responding to these situations when you're dealing with nighttime, you're not even on the ground, you're in the water, all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. When our crews first arrived, they found themselves in the water themselves, trying to rescue people out of the water as well. On top of that, they were trying to figure out who was the most wounded. On top of that, we had an incident command system that was put into place by the district commander. Very well done, but we were trying to get as many resources as we could to this scene. There were many other calls going on at the county at the same time, quite truthfully, and we were basically robbing Peter to pay Paul in a way, trying to get as many resources as we could to our scene. That includes fire department rescues, fire engines, trucks. That includes Sunstar ambulances. We even, like I said, even had critical care transport come, and we called for as many helicopters as we could. And so they were faced with a very challenging job in the nighttime, in the water, trying to figure out who are our most injured and where are you coming from and what boat are you associated with, if that makes any sense, as we're trying to put the information together ourselves through whatever dispatch information that we have. Hopefully that makes sense.
Chief, what kind of injuries were treated last night?
We had multiple folks with broken bones, a lot of orthopedic injuries, a great deal of soft tissue injuries. You did have some head injuries, and of course, we had the decedent as well.
Can you describe that area when it comes to boat traffic? Is it typically very busy? And then also, can you talk to us about, is it normal for the ferry to have that many people on it on a Sunday night?
I can speak to that a little bit. That's an exceptionally busy area. It's an intersection between the egress point from Clearwater Marina, where all the commercial operations occur, and the Intercoastal Waterway. So it's exceptionally busy, and as was mentioned earlier, it becomes an idle zone once you move out into the ICW. In terms of ferry capacities and all those things, that's an answer or question for the Coast Guard. They evaluate all that. It is an inspected vessel. So they have to go through all those things and make those determinations. That'll all be part of the broader investigation, obviously. And that's really all we have time for today. What I will tell you and close with is that Chief Tedesco mentioned it, but it's exceptionally difficult. It's outstanding that so many separate entities and Good Samaritans come together to help. But communication becomes challenging when one victim is in a Coast Guard vessel, one is in a sheriff's vessel, one's in Clearwater Police vessel, 4 have walked to shore. We have family members showing up in vehicles. So I think in any kind of an event like this, that's probably the biggest challenge, is coordinating your resources. And as Chief Tedesco mentioned, we try and establish a unified command early so that we can share those communication efforts and understand the big picture. Now, what changed with this a little bit is the other vessel is 3.5 miles away in another jurisdiction. So it complicates things immensely. So a lot of times, when we see you guys out in the field right after one of these things has occurred, it's exceptionally difficult to get our arms around it initially. And we're really focused on the well-being of our victims and making sure we preserve evidence. So thank you very much for coming.
The second speaker from the FWC, sir, could you say and spell your first and last?
My first name Matthew, Mathew. Last name Dallarosa, Dallarosa. Thank you.
And then the person that was killed, is he on the ferry boat? Was the person that was killed on the ferry boat?
Yes, the person who died was on the ferry boat. In terms of the investigation, they'll determine location and all those things further on. But like I said, we have no more time for questions, but thank you.
Thank you all. Hey, Rob. Are you moving out?